All right, it's 5:15, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is the August 2024 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning. Present here today are John Bennett, Chappie McKay, Bill Goodwin, Alice McGrath, and me, your chair, Jeff Tillman, is also present from the planning and zoning staff are Penny Ashby and Allison Craig. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that if you speak, you please identify yourself for the record. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, the matter is uncontested. The Board of Zoning Appeals usually, but not always, approves uncontested applications. For all applications, the board reserves the right to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or others in attendance prior to rendering a decision. If, however, the city recommends against the application, or if there is opposition to the application, we treat the matter as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions for fact-finding function of the board. And number three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. If you intend to speak this evening, I'm required by the city's ordinance to swear you in to tell the truth. So if you do intend to speak, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You'll signify by saying I do. Thank you. We do have one deferral on this evening's agenda. It's A2 for 94 Stewart Street, East Side, East Central. And so if you're here for 94 Stewart Street, you may be excused. That matter is not proceeding this evening. So we'll start at item A on the agenda, review of minutes and deferred applications from previously advertised BZA-Z agendas. Number one is review of minutes of the July 16, 2024 meeting. The draft meeting minutes have been circulated to you in your packet of materials for this meeting, board members. I don't know if everybody was here for the July meeting. If you weren't, you can abstain, but do I have a motion?
Move approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Ms. Grass seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed, but Mr. Goodwin abstains, as he was not present at that meeting. All right, the next item on our agenda is skipping over A2. We're now at A3, 35 Prelo Street, French Quarter, Council District number 8, PMS number 458-09. 02-007 zoned LB, requesting a special exception under section 54-511 to allow 7,658 square feet of indoor patron use area and 1,880 square feet of outdoor patron use area without providing the required parking spaces. 66 spaces are required. The owner is Prelo Enterprises LLC. The applicant is Simmons Young. All right, Ms. Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Dibbles. This application came before this board back in July, on July the 16th. And I have a short summary from that meeting since one of our board members was not present at that time. So very quickly, this has been a vacant building. It has been a vacant building for some time. We have had previous applications before this board that were approved. One was for a small hotel. The other one was for a mixed-use development with residential units above with a retail use on the ground floor. At that time, we just discovered that these projects were not able to move forward. So here today, we have a new potential buyer who wants to use this building for events. And it's very important to say that the use proposed is a permitted use. The request for a parking special exception is strictly for the lack of parking that this building can accomplish. Within that ordinance, which is section 54-511, there are 5 conditions for an approval to be granted. And it's very important to note that 1, the LB zone district by right permits an event use. 2, the parking special exception also addresses the conditions of the lot. And as you can see by the aerial view, this building occupies the entire lot. It's a historic footprint. It has always been that way. So there is no way that you can provide parking on that site the way the buildings are configured. And then it talks about whether or not the street frontage of an existing lot is so limited that a driveway for access to a parking area would unreasonably or impractically reduce area available for occupancy. Again, none of this can be done. So what becomes important are the last 2 questions of the special exception. Question number 4 talks about whether or not the grant of the special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. Question number 5 talks about whether or not the applicant has pursued good faith efforts to provide off-street parking. At the meeting that we had back in July, the applicant spoke about their efforts to try to provide fine parking. And their efforts were not able to be accomplished. A parking lease is not available. The city's requirement for a parking lease is very restrictive, and that is just not a practical choice. However, there are 3 parking garages in close proximity to this property. And this aerial view is about the last view. It's the last picture almost in this presentation. You will see a red marking that shows the subject property, which is 35 Prelo. And then to the south of this property is actually a city-owned garage. To the north is another parking deck, and to the west is another parking deck. Both of these parking decks are within an 8-minute walk from 35 Prelo Street. So that question of whether or not the applicant has pursued good faith efforts to provide off-street parking, luckily, favorably, there are public parking garages that could support the events in this building. So then question number 4 becomes very, very important, whether or not the granting of the special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. When we heard this application at the meeting in July, the city was very concerned about that requirement. the board was very concerned about that requirement. And when this application was deferred because of that requirement, the city requested that the applicant speak with the neighbors at the One Vendu condo property and speak to them about two main things: the impact of music and noise on the rooftop deck. So the applicant did speak with and met with those condo owners. And I have a memorandum of use that was given to the city for review. It was also sent to the board, but it's very detailed. So I am also having them to review this document for this application.
Thank you.
Representing the city, and of course, my supervisor, who's the zoning administrator, Lee Batchelder. Lee has reviewed this memorandum of use in detail that has been presented between the applicant and the One Vendu Range Association. The issue of noise and music on that rooftop deck has been very, very detailed in this memorandum. They have done a great job of addressing everything having to do with music, live music, amplification, noise, etc. So we feel that the concern that the city had at the July 16th meeting and the concern that our board members had, we feel that this memorandum of agreement has satisfied those questions. Being that is the case, the city recommends approval with a condition. And that condition is that the applicant shall provide the zoning division with an executed and recorded memorandum of the letter of agreement between the applicant and the One Vendu Range Association, Inc., that is attached to this application prior to the issuance of a building permit by the city for the improvements for the event space. This would be binding with this property as long as this use exists.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Ashby. All right. Do we have anybody here who is in opposition to the application for 35 Fairlane? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Okay. All right, Mr. Young, anything you'd like to address with the board?
Yeah, I may add one thing. I'll be brief. Thank you, Ms. Ashby, that covered most of it. I'm Simmons Young here on behalf of the potential buyers. So there's the letter of support from the French Quarter Neighborhood Association, which we'll all, and from Jeffrey Smith, is the owner of 2 units at the building on the north of East Bay. Last week, the team also met with 2 other interested neighbors on Cord Street, previously unidentified. And as a result, the buyer group is proposing further noise reducing infrastructure on the west side of the building. So since that last meeting, the buyer has made changes to his operations, and the architecture teams made alterations to the rooftop design, which will be submitted to the BAR next week if this goes through and is approved. A couple other 3-4 quick points. As you notice, the third proposal, so the building is a little bit derelict, so this is a great opportunity. And we're excited to be part of the team. It's going to take a lot to make it a Class A event space. This potential buyer is dedicated to that and knows the implications of it. He's hired a team of architects, engineers, and contractors to look at all that and realize what he's getting into. And we would request your support respectfully for the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Young or for the city? Anybody else would like to speak in favor? Okay, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sean Jenkins. I'd like to speak in favor of the project. I serve at MSC Children's Health on our board, actually as the chairman of special events and fundraising. I am born and raised Charlestonian, live in the area on Broad Street, College of Charleston alumni and local business owner, and just wanted to speak in favor of the project. I'm familiar with it. I've had friends and family married there over the years when it was previously in operation and remember it as the Harbor Club, and I'm excited to see it brought back to life as such. The new ownership group is supportive of the Children's Hospital, and I just think that needed to be stated in their favor as they're already contributing to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. All right, anybody else wish to speak in favor? Yes, sir.
My name is Nick Capone. I've lived on Queen Street since 2008 at this point. And I just think it would be great to have something back in that space. It's been vacant since 2019. So it's kind of, you know, I'll walk past there every day with my dog and, you know, 9 times out of 10, there's someone sleeping, everything's overgrown. It's just, you know, it would really be nice to bring that back into the neighborhood. And as far as music goes, I mean, the venue has music on their rooftop. I've been there for 16 years now and I've never had an issue with any music around. So just kind of wanted to put that out there too.
Thank you very much.
Thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate your comments. All right, anybody else would like to speak on this application? Okay. Any questions, discussion? Motions?
Use, it will go along with the facilities. If the sale doesn't go through, then that use will still be in place.
I believe that the agreement is specific, okay, to the use in question.
Okay.
So if someone else were to take ownership, they would be bound by that agreement as it is written today. And any change to that, it would have to come back before this board.
Okay.
Do we need to know what the other two adjustments that were made to reduce noise? Do we need to have that on record or no?
Is that part of the agreement or is that something that happened subsequent?
We can show you the BAR renderings if you like. That would help to.
I mean, all you're doing is you're going to make further improvements to the situation, right? So,
That's correct.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you meant that it was more of a written agreement, not design.
Oh, well, the
Agreement.
one that Ms. Ashby pointed out, that is the details written.
Okay, I thought that was an addendum.
And
to
then
that.
they're applying for changes in their design to further ameliorate
Got it.
concerns or potential conflicts with neighbors on the noise.
Anything else for me?
Okay. Thank you.
Just a comment that I think this is one of the more detailed and thorough approaches to mitigating noise in the neighborhood. I appreciate the amount of effort this took.
All right, so are you going to move for approval with the condition that's read by Ms. Ashby?
Yes. you want me to-
So we've got a motion to approve with condition. Mr. Bennett seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously, 5-0, and the special exception for your property at 35 Perla Street is approved. Thank you. Approved with the condition that's not read. It'll be in the record. You understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda, A4, 165 President Street, West Side, Council District number 6. PMS number 460-11-01-111, zone GB. requesting a special exception under section 54-511 to allow takeout restaurant at 172 square feet of inside patron area without 3 required off-street parking spaces. The owner is DLR3 LLC. The applicant is Jason Ye. Ms. Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbles. This aerial slide shows this building as it is nestled between 2 buildings on each side. This has been an existing commercial building in the West Side neighborhood that is probably slightly north of the crosstown. And it has been vacant for quite some time. The use proposed, this is a street view of the building, and this is how it looks today. The use proposed is for a takeout restaurant, a little sandwich shop. No inside patron use area, just takeout. Square footage, 172 square feet, which is really not very large. If we look at the plans, you will see that the majority of the interior space is for preparation, back of house, with just that takeout area being to the front that would obviously be some type of walk-up access. The city's review of this application, as it is being requested for a parking special exception, again, we are subject to those 5 questions to be given consideration for approval for parking. It is very obvious this building is hampered by its existing footprint. It has no space from the property line. It is.
Ms. Ashby, no, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just, Mr. Goodwin has just indicated that he needs to recuse himself on this item. And he will presumably fill out a form after we finish, but we no longer have a quorum available to take action on this item this evening. So it's going to have to be deferred because
Yes, sir.
2 of our 5 attendees this evening, Mr. Bennett and Mr. Goodwin, unfortunately have had to recuse themselves due to conflict. So we'll have to defer this item until the next meeting, and it'll be on the agenda whenever we can get it on there.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbles. We completely understand.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I just didn't want to waste time with something we couldn't vote on.
Yes, sir. So it's. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
All right, sorry about that.
Understood.
All right, the next item on our agenda, if we can get Mr. Goodwin back.
Check.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
All right, the next item on our agenda is A5 to Gerard Street, the Crescent, Council District 11, EMS number 421-10-00-096, zone SR 8, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a 2-story addition, garage, porch, studio with an 18-foot total side setback, 24 feet is required. The owners are Tyler Dorman and Caroline Bird. The applicant is Habitable Form, Chelsea Anderson. Sash.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbles. Property referenced, and here's an aerial view of the property, is in the Crescent neighborhood. This is one of those lots in the Crescent, which most of them are large size lots with lots of trees, grand trees. And the homes for this neighborhood are considered to be historic in its appearance. The lot, as you can see by the aerial view, and it's also, you can see it on the zoning map, that east side portion of the lot sort of juts in, kind of angles within the existing lot line. And that's important to note because it does affect building footprint of this lot that is not a true rectangle. Setbacks for the crescent are intended to prevail, or I should say, not adversely affect the character of this neighborhood when it comes to the size of the lots, the grand trees, and that whole frontage from the front property line. All those things are historic characteristics of this neighborhood, and they are very important. So the applicant is proposing for the owner a one-car garage. And in the Crescent, you can have a garage that's attached to the house. You can also have a garage that is detached. And there are other properties within this neighborhood where variances have been granted for like a two-car garage or detached accessory building. So the request is not unusual, but the fact that this applicant with the plans they have determined that the setbacks on each side will be maintained. The issue before the board, the issue that is creating the variance, the Crescent has a very large side setback. You have to be a minimum of 9 feet on each side, but your total side setback has to equal 24 feet. So again, we are trying to preserve the character of this neighborhood, and this is why they have the requirements, the setback criteria that is present today. Setbacks for this house on the east side, you have also a lot of grand trees on this side. And where on that side, you could not really do an addition that would be practical and not just limit the variance request to just a total side. It would probably be a more extensive request for a variance. The applicant has spoken with the city zoning administrator about different plans for this house. And after review, it was considered that this proposed one-story garage, this proposed detached garage with a hyphen to separate the addition from the historic architecture of the house would be constructed, and that hyphen is that conditioned space and a mudroom. And so proposed is this one-story garage that does meet that 9-foot side setback. It just does not meet the total side setback. The total side setback will only be 18 feet. Wanting to be sensitive to the historic architecture of the main house, the architect decided that that hyphen would be very appropriate. And in doing so, you get to have a garage that will be practical. You get to have that separation from the historic house that keeps the character of this neighborhood in terms of its architecture, in terms of how it is situated on this lot. The city's review of this application is that the request to not be required to meet the total side setback is warranted and appropriate, and that the variance test is met. The proposed addition, when you go through the variance test, where it talks about exceptional and extraordinary conditions, this lot, that oddly configured jog on that east side does create an existing condition to the property. The fact that the variance is being requested, it is not to say that other lots in this neighborhood are exactly the same as this lot. This lot has that unique feature. The other part of the variance test is whether or not the proposed variance would adversely affect the adjacent property owner. And then the last prong of the variance test is whether or not the granting of the variance would be contrary to the character of the district. The city feels that the 4 questions of the variance are being met. That garage on the east side, remember, meets the required 9-foot setback. It is the total side that is in question, and we do have support from that neighbor at 4 Girard, which is to the west of the proposed addition, that has submitted in writing their approval. City recommendation is for approval of this variance request.
Okay. Thank you, Penny. Do we have anybody here who wishes to speak against the application for 2 Girard Road? Anybody wants to speak in opposition? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner or applicant?
Yes, we're here for any questions. Penny,
Okay.
you did a great job. Thank you.
All right, any questions of the city, questions? Applicant or the owner?
Approval.
All right, Mr. Goodwin moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes 5-0 unanimously, and the variance for 2 Girard is granted. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda, A6, Sportsman Island Drive. The Ferry, Council District 1, TMS number 271-00-02-066, zoned GB. Requesting a special exception under section 54-206F to allow an RV and boat storage facility on this property. The owner is 1.7 SI LLC. The applicant is Kellum Engineering. Ms. Ashby.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tibbles. The property that is before you is in the Berkeley County area. Property was annexed into the city many years ago and is now being looked at to develop. The request is for a special exception in our zoning ordinance that talks about mini storage, and it talks about in a certain zone districts where you can have storage as long as you meet certain conditions. And the applicant has addressed those conditions in their application, wanting to point out that on that application where you see variance, there is a handwritten that it is not required, because the adjacent street, if you want to call it, is really not a street. It's not a right of way. It is an easement. So that buffer requirement actually is not applicable. So with going through the conditions for this use, the applicant is only wanting to have this RV storage and boat storage on a surface lot. No buildings are being proposed. So it meets all of the conditions for a special exception approval. The issue with a buffer, the reason why that has gone away, that easement is an unimproved easement. It actually is in a wetland area. So in order to really use it, you would have to build a bridge. And that is at this point impractical and cost prohibitive. So the conditions of the special exception for this use, as the applicant has addressed, are in compliance with the requirements for a special exception for this boat and RV storage on this property. City's recommendation is approval of this application the special exception requirements will be met. We are not aware of any opposition to this application, and I do believe that the applicant is here for questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in opposition to the application for Sportsman Island Drive? Anybody here in opposition? All right, seeing no one in opposition, we have the owner or applicant, anything? Yeah.
Thomas Kellum with Kellum Engineering. Thank you very much, Ms. Ashby. I don't have a whole lot to add. We believe it's within character of the use on Sportsman's Island. There's a marine dealership there. Obviously some boats parked next door. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kellum.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Kellum? Any questions for the city?
This will be a surface lot only? Is that what this is?
Yes, sir. There will be some covered spots, but it's only surface lot. Nothing will be completely exposed. The perimeter spaces will be covered, just offer sun and rain protection, weather protection.
What is the acreage, just out of curiosity?
It's 1.7 acres, but it's, I don't know off the top, a portion of it is the critical area. I believe it's around 1 acre. Uplands. Yeah, we got 1.2 acres of island area.
Thank you.
And just so, make sure I understand, so no stackable,
No, sir.
okay. You need for approval?
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The application for the special exception for the RV and boat storage facility at Sportsman Island Drive is approved. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is, we're in the section B, new applications, number 1, 49 Lolandra Avenue, Carolina Terrace, Council District 9, PMS number 418-13-00-262, zoned SR1, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a garage addition with a 5-foot west side setback 9 feet are required, zoned SR1. Owner is David G. Gensler. The applicant is Coastal Creek Design, Joel Adrian. Ms. Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Dibbles. Property before you, 49 Lolandra. It is very important to note where this property is. This property is in an area where you have Charleston County and city properties coexisting. And many years ago, another property that was annexed into the city. So the question becomes, what is the hardship for this lot, for what they are proposing? What are the existing and extraordinary conditions? Well, for one, setbacks for Charleston County are different. In fact, they're a little bit closer than what the city of Charleston zoning ordinance requires. You have a property where that house is oriented more to the east side, and it's a wide west side yard, as you can see by the rendering of the zoning map. And the site plan will show that that distance is pretty extensive. And this property is zoned SR1, which requires a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet. This lot meets that, it actually exceeds it. So when it comes to what is exceptional and extraordinary, what becomes exceptional and extraordinary about this lot is you have a building footprint that is where it is. And in order to make reasonable use of the property, which is also a part of the variance test, the applicant is asking to construct a detached 1-story garage. We have a family member of this property that has a minivan and is in a wheelchair. So the footprint of this garage is not only to accommodate, of course, the width of the van itself, but also maneuvering that wheelchair from the garage into the house. Currently, the owner has to park the car in the driveway and then maneuver to the rear of the property where there's a ramp that leads to a screen porch. Being very considerate and sensitive to that maneuvering subjects the owner to outside weather conditions, which no one has any control over. So the addition is really very sensitive that the design professional has proposed a footprint that is not exhaustive. You know, it's not a significant encroachment into that side setback. It's a difference of 4 feet. By allowing this garage to be constructed, the owner of the property will be able to pull into a covered space and then maneuver enough where there is a automatic ramp on the minivan that is deployed anytime you enter the van or exit, and just maneuver enough where that individual can get into the house and it's in a covered space. We find that this is not an unreasonable request, it's a practical request. These are photos of the property showing they've done some renovations, and you can see that concrete slab there. If you tried to put that garage to the rear, you would not have that surface for tires on that minivan. So this is really the only place that you could put it to build a structure where you can move into it, be covered, and enter the house. The owner that's adjacent to this property at, I believe it, in our presentation, I think it's 51, Lalandra, has submitted an email in support of the applicant's request. And also wanting to convey that the side setback for Charleston County for a single-family residence is 5 feet. So we feel with all of these conditions and with the existing condition of this lot, city's recommendation is to support this application.
All right, thank you, Penny. Do we have anybody here who wishes to speak in opposition to the application for 4049 Leland? All right, Mr. Adrian, I see you here. Anything you'd like to say to the board?
Yeah, I'll come up. So Bill Adrian, Coastal Creek, designer for this, and Ms. Penny, thank you. I think that maybe when you retire, if I could hire you as a consultant to present all my applications, I probably would have more success. But no, so a couple of things on just why this house was selected by the people that own it. Wife is in the wheelchair, and the home is low to the ground on 1 story, so it was perfect for them. They looked at and talked about putting a ramp in the front going up into the house. Safety was her concern about that. Her husband travels frequently. She's home alone and just coming home at night, getting out, wheeling up this ramp and just feeling vulnerable. So the goal was to create this small little attached, it's attached, not detached, but attached little 1-car garage. And Ms. Penny's correct. It's the width is required so she can pull the minivan in, slide the door, let the ramp come out, go down and not roll right into a wall, so she can actually hit, garage floor and maneuver and go. So we didn't design anything that was extravagant or over what is actually necessary for the function of her vehicle. So I'll leave it at that and answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Adrian. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Adrian or for the city?
Make a motion.
All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Ms. Grass seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously 5-0, and the variance for 49 Lolandra Avenue is granted. Thank you, Mr. Adrian.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right. The next item on our agenda, B2, 21 Burns Lane and 360 King Street downtown, Council District 8. TMS number 457-04-02-085 and 018, Zone GBA. Requesting a special exception under section 54-220 to allow an approved accommodations use at 360 King Street to relocate required meeting space, 580 square feet, to the first floor at 21 Burns Lane. The owner is Janelli 73 LLC. The applicant is William Stroud Esquire on behalf of Eric Johnson, member of Ms. Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Dibbles. This property was before this board back in March, on March 5th. And at that time, it was approved for 12-unit accommodations use. This building at 360 was where the approval was given under section 54-220 special exception ordinance. The ordinance has a list of criteria, a lot of criteria. One of which is required meeting space, conference room space. That space has to be provided based on a ratio of 400 square feet per 10 sleeping units. So at the time that this meeting room conference area was approved at 360 King Street, the space that was provided to be the meeting space was on the second floor, and the plans, we scroll through the plans. It was on the second floor in unit 203. So now the owner has acquired ownership of 21 Burns Lane. And this is why this application is before you again, because that meeting room space the request is to relocate the space from 360 King Street to 21 Burns Lane on the first floor. The presentation shows the previous application, the approval, and the square footage rendering that floor plan for 360 King Street. And the slide on the screen now shows what is being proposed at 21 Burns Lane. And that meeting space area is actually 580 square feet. So two things are happening here. We are asking to relocate the meeting space from 360 King to 21 Burns Lane on the second floor. It is shown by that little red bar what that total meeting space square footage is. So not only is the meeting space still in compliance with the requirement in the zoning ordinance for special exceptions used for accommodations, but it also exceeds what is required with that 580 square feet. The relocation of that meeting space is to allow 360 King Street to not compromise those units. This allowance will provide these sleeping units to be larger units, better units, probably better marketable units. The applicant, in wanting to present their request and making sure that it is legally sound, has prepared a declaration of restricted covenant, which we did not get when we sent out our public comments and information to our board members. So I'm passing out this declaration of restrictive covenant for their review. Again, representing the city zoning administrator, Lee Batchelder has reviewed this declaration of restrictive covenant. And he feels that the special exception request to relocate that meeting conference space from 360 King and to move it to 21 Burns Lane, the city feels that this request can be supported. Wanting also to point out, and I apologize for not doing so, the proximity of 21 Burns Lane to 360 King Street is separated only by one lot, which is a surface parking lot. And again, both properties are under the same ownership. The city recommends approval of this applicant's request with a condition that a copy of the signed and recorded declaration of restrictive covenant attached to this application is provided to the zoning division prior to the issuance of a building permit or new certificate of occupancy, whichever comes first, by the city for these properties. So the declaration of the restricted covenant details that agreement, that arrangement that the board has for their review. And if there are any questions, I'm sure that they will ask. But we feel that another thing, nothing else has changed with the original approval for this accommodations use. All of the other requirements are the same. It's this one requirement that the applicant wishes to just relocate required meeting space from 360 King to 21 Burns Lane.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ashby. So just to confirm, section 54-220 B1K
Yes,
doesn't require that the meeting space be in the same building. It just requires that it's within 500 feet. Is that correct?
yes, sir, and it's contiguous, so you have that meeting space in the space as it is shown
Okay.
on this floor.
And this property is contiguous in the sense that it's adjacent, separated only by the right of way.
Well, by a surface parking lot,
Okay.
surface parking lot.
All right, is anybody here to speak in opposition to the application for 21 Burns Lane and 360 King Street? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner or applicant here?
If I may, Mr. Temples.
Yes.
This is 360 King.
Okay,
This is 21 Burns
I see
Lane.
it.
This
Okay,
is that surface parking lot.
I'm with you.
Considered contiguous, even though if it's separated, does it not have to be?
Is it
The
square
building
footage
is not
that's-
contiguous, but the lots are, and so.
So the lots are, so the surface lot is not a separate lot.
The lots are separate, but they share a property line.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's that adjacent connection.
And 21 Burns on this is there, and then 350 King Street is to the left.
Yeah, it's that green parcel highlighted in green.
So
Well,
there is a lot in between.
yes, that lot that's with all those TMS numbers, that's the parking lot.
And that's owned by someone else.
That is owned by somebody else. The applicant owns 360 and 21 Burns Lane.
All right, Mr. Johnson, sir, would you like to come on up here?
Sure.
I'm a little concerned over the contiguity issue.
No, so when I first also purchased this building, I went and met with Lee and said, hey, is this even feasible? Because I'll say, I don't want to waste anybody's time. If this is something we can do. And so he said, I think so because you are contiguous, but let me speak with city council. And city council came and said, yes, you do meet it. So that parking lot is owned by several different owners. I actually own, with purchasing 21 berms, I own the 4 spaces in that spot. So I actually own 6 spaces in that lot. And I own 21 berms. So there's multiple owners in that lot, but I own the majority in that lot because I own 6 spaces of the 20 spaces in that lot.
So that, I guess, in your discussions with Lee and other officials, that bridges the gap, so to speak, in terms of property lines. You have majority ownership interest in the parking lot.
Basically, like I said, I really want to do it because I think it's just an ease of use for guests. It's on the first floor, and first you go on the second floor, it's, the retail tenants in there now want to expand. And so there's a wedding planner upstairs. So she was on a month-to-month with previous owners. I put her on a long-term lease. She was super excited. Portigo, wanted to expand. So I expanded her lease. So everyone's super happy. And I'm actually, we're going to pave that parking lot actually Thursday. They actually did some artifacting for this week. I'll let them do that. We're about to pave it. So like I said, I think as far as the character of the area, it's only going to add to it. The previous owners really let it go. I gave them an extra week to vacate upon acquisition because they shut down their business and moved back to Italy. They tore out all the manholes and cut all the fixtures off the ceiling. So I got to get new lights and new manholes. But yeah, I'm improving the building and putting more capital into it to make sure it's going to be a nice building for the future, that area.
Is the meeting space, since it's on the first floor, so the tenant that just left, was it retail? Was it a retail?
They were retail, but like I said, they vacated. So it was a jewelry store. They left the building and vacated the space. So it's essentially vacant space now.
What would the meeting space be used for?
Just for guests, if they want to come over, it's right across the street, so you can just come over if you want to sit and knock out some emails or do anything or get on a conference call. So I'm actually painting it right now and, I'm going to furnish it and try to have a nice little area for guests to use.
These buildings could be sold separately.
Oh, no, that was the thing that I talked to Lee about, that we came to an agreement. I own both the buildings, are under Janelli 73. And so we came up with, hey, the question is, hey, obviously you meet everything, you're good, but down the road, you sold one building, you wouldn't be in compliance. And so I said, hey, let's put together an agreement that says that you can't do that. So they have to be sold together. So that's what that declaration, I had Lee review it. I had an attorney put it together and Lee reviewed it to make sure it was okay. So.
I'm just sort of curious, the declaration doesn't specify where in the building your 480 square feet is. So certainly, I guess that has the opportunity to move around, but I'm a little concerned about losing that frontage space right on Burns by having you're losing a retail space right there on the street.
Well, not really, because that building, it's an L-shaped building, so it's actually parallel with King. So you can see the multiple doors. So that was one of the things. So a lot of those doors were boarded up. So I'm going to have it where I'm going to open up a lot of those doors so tenants can actually start using that. Because Portigo, she wants to start using some of these doors. And so the previous owner essentially boarded all the doors. So essentially you can enter through all this. Like I said, it's a long L-shaped type building, so you can enter through all those little entrances right there, which is just that one entrance. So you've got multiple entrances.
If you don't mind my asking, why not move the meeting space somewhere further out of somewhere less visible or onto the second floor?
Well, I could, but again, I want to work with the local tenants that are there, and she really wanted that space. Yeah, I could move it, but she said, Eric, I really would like, the previous owner would never let me expand. So she's in all that yellow space. And so she wanted to move farther, closer towards those stairs. So it would really help me expand my business since I'm already right there. If I could go take those 2 other spaces, and then she even wants to possibly take the space upstairs. And so I said, hey, that's okay with me. You know, I said, I want to work with you to, you know, she wants a long-term lease. Her lease is about to expire. So I was just working with her, and it didn't really, the ordinance didn't really specify where it needs to be. So I was like, well, I could just have it in front, and it'd be an inviting area that I'm gonna have, where if you walk in, it's just a nice little area that you kind of look at stuff and sit down and enjoy your, you know, if you wanted to walk outside to the courtyard, you could. So I just felt that was kind of the best little area for it. And it met the requirements. I mean, again, I want my tenants, you know, Portico, and then I wanted them to be happy, and I don't want them to leave, because, so they're excited about that opportunity.
So what kind of tenants, you don't have to tell me who they are, but just like who occupies that building now?
So there's a medical spa in there right now, and then a wedding planner upstairs. So you have office on the first floor that's expanding office space, and then the retail. Well, actually, maybe the wedding planners, I guess you consider office. They're upstairs. They're that kind of the light blue area, and then the yellow is the medical spa, which is essentially office and a little bit of retail. But she actually wants to expand her practice a little bit.
So would these tenants be utilizing meeting space?
They could come through it, so that's why she wanted to come, you know, obviously, it'd be open, you know, any accommodations, anybody could walk through there, if they wanted to, but like I said, I'm gonna open it up where they can enter through the front on the side there versus always kind of coming through the area, but if they wanted to, they could, but it's really more for guests to kind of have access to.
So, stop.
When you say you're referring to the 360, that's right.
Yes, absolutely, yes, that way they can drop their bags off and park their car right there, park the stuff back there, so they can come in, use the meeting space, they can get on the call, what have you.
The location of the meeting space is relatively good, so you don't have guests walking through the building anyway.
That's right, yes, sir.
I think that's not a bad location at all.
Yes, sir.
You said you met with city council on this?
Yes, sir, Lee did. So Lee, I met with Lee a couple months ago after I acquired the building, asked him about it. He was feasible.
That's.
Yeah, I think so. We have several other properties that have adjacent or properties that aren't in the actual building. And then he said, well, let me talk to our council, make sure that he sent me. So, yeah.
So, yeah, you said you.
Oh,
Yes,
she
sir.
met with probably legal counsel.
Yeah.
So I think it's just saying.
Yeah, he sent me an email saying it's good. Once I submitted the application, they would put it on.
This is.
Yeah, no, I've got it. All right, so, yeah, so just for the record and just because there was a question about it, as we look at 54-220 of the zoning ordinance and it's 54-20B1K1. The last sentence of that says, in either case, at least 75% of the meeting and conference space shall be contiguous. So you just have to keep the meeting and conference space together.
Yes,
At least
that's what those
75%
two
of
spaces
the,
are.
which is, I think, what you're doing. And I'm not sure that it requires those lots. Sure. It's just, I think the way that the city is looking at this is that it is on the whole, a singular property, particularly if the declaration ties them together permanently. Then you have 350 King and 21 Burns that are tied together in perpetuity so that you can't change the use of 21 Burns sometime down the road after you get this approval, and you'll have to maintain that meeting and conference
No, I
space
mean, the
there.
goal is, like I said, that whole area, I mean, it's just gonna be a better accommodations use property with having that space. I don't fix that building up. So I don't ever plan on selling it separately. To me, the value is them together as one. Like the parking lot, like I said, I'm not gonna spend the money to improve the parking lot to try to increase the character of that area. I don't know if y'all drove down Burns Lane. There's like 6 potholes, and so no one's really kept it up. So it's been tough. The previous owners just kind of let it, they didn't really care. So, like I said, now that I own several parking spots, I'd like to try to get that area nice.
Okay. And you're in agreement with the condition that the declaration will be executed and recorded before anything.
Yeah, I could sign that here today. if I want to.
So the city didn't have any concerns regarding the loss of the retail. The Preservation Society submitted that letter of opposition, talking about the loss of the diverse uses. Did y'all have any discussion about that?
I will respond in this manner. The fact that the main accommodations use is at 360 King, which was approved and it met the criteria. This, you look at it as just an expansion into another building that is going to appropriately have the required meeting and conference space. You still have that requirement that has to be met at 360 King for that frontage to be retail. So I don't think that has gone
Nothing's
away.
happening Nothing's happened to anything on 360 King. Yet
Right,
it's still
I was
there.
asking about Burns Lane.
I don't think you have to include it. That could be expanded to that building. But I don't think per the ordinance as it is today, it would be required.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you've got you have the approval, I guess, what Penny is saying is he's got the approval for 350 King, and if you look at it as one overall property, then he's just simply moving the conference and meeting space. If you look at it from the perspective of the 21 Burns property, bar is being changed, use is being altered. And I don't, but then in order to make a finding to deny the application on that basis, it's almost as though we would have to apply all of the criteria in 54-220 back to 21 Burns again. I'm not sure if you have press.
I'll say I'm a little uncomfortable, but I'm not sure I can express what it is about it that makes me feel uncomfortable beyond just the nature of having met the requirement through by separating out the usage into a separate adjacent space. You know, maybe that's not that bad. I think maybe the thing that combined with the loss of the retail on the Burns Street, I think that those two kind of coupled together really kind of put me at unease.
Lee mentioned me when I met with him that there's several properties that are the same way, that they're different. They're not in the same building. So that's why I was set up.
And that doesn't surprise me. I mean, in many ways too, you know, properties sometimes address their parking requirements by acquiring adjacent properties or holding long-term leases. It's not, I mean, how is that different? So you're getting the same, you're satisfying the requirements through agreements with adjacent spaces.
I would say this, I think we might be missing two key players here. And one of them is Lee. I know you keep referring to discussions with Lee, and I'm not at all suggesting, Penny, that you're not a perfectly wonderful and adequate replacement for Lee. However, he didn't have the conversations with you. He's speaking of conversations that he had with Lee. Lee is not
I've only had
here.
one conversation with Lee, and I had others, my attorney spoke with him, but he sent me an email with saying, hey, this
works.
essentially gives you the approval. So you just have to bring your next application, just bring.
Did
If I would have never came here and I thought Lee had told me, hey, this thing doesn't work, I would have not.
Right, I understand.
I could send the email.
You have any fun?
I have it right here on my phone.
While he's looking for that, I also like to add that highest and best use of burns. Sometimes when we're looking at highest and best use, we would have to consider parking and all. This is a less intrusive use. It's a passive use that's gonna be on occasion. And so if we're saying that it should be something else, we have to look at the conditions surrounding that and whether that's feasible and whether it's a highest and best use for that particular location. So is this a better use? Should come into question as well. It's sort of passive, it goes along with the other uses. It seems like it's not intrusive to other people. Other businesses could come there and it'd be a little bit different. So I think in an overall scheme of things, we have to kind of slow down and look at that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, retail is really tight back there. And you're not on the main street, so it doesn't really work for, if you really want to start a business to be like, Bill was mentioning, to be off King Street in the back there. It's never really kind of worked. It's worked for the Italians because they bought the building, I guess, 10, 15 years ago for, I think, 500,000, but today's rents, like, it's tough to ever make that work back there. So.
I'll publish this email if you don't mind, Mr.
Sure.
Johnson.
Yes, sir.
This is an email from Lee Batchelder to Eric Johnson dated June 18, 2024 regarding 360 King. Good morning, Eric. Following up on our meeting last week, I see no zoning issues with being able to add 21 Burns Lane to the 360 King Street accommodations use approval and application to the BZA-Z to amend the existing vested right for 360 King Street by adding 21 Burns Lane to the approved accommodations use should be submitted to us. I think the format of the request should be similar to the submittal for the March 5th BZA-Z approval attached with background information, new floor plans showing layout for both buildings, and the response to section 54-220B1K, noting the changes. That it goes on. Talk about the next submittal date. So, thank you. That's helpful. Yes, sir. So any further questions for Mr. Johnson or any?
Need to move it forward. I'll make a motion for approval.
All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Mr. Goodwin seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, how many? So we got you got to vote, Mr. McKay. You got to vote, Mr. Goodwin. Aye or nay?
I'm aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we've got 3, 4, we've got 2 against. That means it's not a use variance, so you get your pass here. So you got a special exception granted by a vote of 3.
And make a correction with the conditions.
Oh, with the condition, yes, of course, you understand
Oh,
that.
yes.
The special exception is approved under the condition that the declaration is signed and recorded before any permits are pulled.
Yes, sir.
Okay? All right, thank you, Mr. President. We'll attach that as part of the approval of the record.
I'll get a second, so.
Well, why don't you just,
I'll just hang out.
okay, sure, that's fine. All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda, and thank you, Penny,
You're welcome.
for catching that. I appreciate it. All right. B3, 1315 Maverick Street, North Central, Council District 4, TMS number 463-15-04-052, Zone DR2F, requesting a variance after the fact from section 54-301 to allow a detached accessory building shed with a 15-foot front setback, a 0-foot side street setback, and a 53% lot occupancy. 60 feet, 25 feet are required, 50% lot occupancy limit, 51% existing. Owners are Ethan Brunlegger and Emily Buckley. The applicant is Ethan Brunlegger.
Thank you, Mr. Dibbles. The slide before you actually shows, since this is an after the fact approval, the storage shed is already there. So this picture shows this storage shed right there to the front and off to the side. In the zoning ordinance, especially on the peninsula, it is it's hard to comprehend what our setback requirements are. Because on any corner lot, and there is a proposal for a detached accessory building, storage shed, garage, detached accessory building that may have conditioned space, a corner lot requires a more extensive side street setback. That setback is 25 feet. So it becomes very difficult when you're trying to explain to people what's required when they say that they want to do a shed. And then that extensive front setback, which is 60 feet. The owner of this property, unfortunately, did not realize that putting up a shed needed zoning approval. And what drove the construction of the shed, unfortunately, and I could not include it in the presentation, but there were robberies and different issues of crime, police chase, and all kinds of things that were going on. Owners, things that were not protected, bicycles, tools, all kinds of things were stolen from the property. So the owner decided, okay, I'm gonna get a structure, I'm gonna build a shed so I can protect my property. And this is why this is an after the fact approval that we discovered. It was zoning and building inspections. Building inspections, because it's a structure, it needs a building permit. Zoning, it needs zoning approval. So the setbacks that's being requested for the variance is just already there. It requires a 60-foot front setback and it requires a 25 feet side street setback. You can see the right of way, that's Oswego, that is right there. Now, in just looking at it, just without those issues, first of all, when you're asking for a variance, is it in character? Well, it's a very nice storage shed. It's in keeping with the neighborhood. It's not even very, very large. It doesn't overpower the house. If we go back to the zoning map and you look at this property, there are actually 2 buildings on this lot that are actually detached single-family residences. Maybe about 5-6 years ago, that property came before this board to reestablish single-family use in those 2 buildings. They were run down, dilapidated, and they were renovated within an existing footprint That was a condition and conversation from the zoning administrator. And you can see that there's not a whole lot of separation between the front and the rear building, but there's some open space where there's some parking and a nice fence and all of that. So when the owner decided to construct the shed, there was not very much room left to place it. So we have two issues. We have the setback issue and we have a slight lot occupancy issue, which is not uncommon for these lots on the peninsula to exceed the lot occupancy. We do have in our presentation support for this request. These are letters of support from adjacent property owners that live in the area. They are aware of the issues with crime and they are supportive of this application. We do not want to set a precedent for after the fact approvals, but we feel that there is a case of hardship with this particular application and city's recommendation is for approval.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ashby. Anybody here in opposition to the application for the variance at 15 Maverick Street? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner or applicant here? Yes.
The applicant's my husband, but of course, he's not feeling well today. So this was his project, so I'm speaking on behalf. I just think it's worth noting that we're first-time owners. This is not intentional. We're learning, so this won't happen again. The reason that we did construct the shed, thank you, Ms. Ashby, is that we, beside the fact, actually had a golf cart stolen, as well as a power washer, leaf blower, pillows on our outside furniture, etc. And that space in between the homes is actually technically a parking spot, so we can't build there. We need to maintain that. And we do park our car there when we're out of town. And so we built it on this side for that reason, and so that we could store our stuff that doesn't otherwise sit inside. So thank you and apologies if this is after the fact. This won't happen again.
Did your husband build it or did y'all have a contractor?
We had a contractor, and surprised this didn't come up, but we use somebody that works with a couple of the neighbors that yeah, he didn't bring up anything, so probably not the contractor.
All right, any further questions for the owner or for the city?
Move for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously and the variance after the fact is granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda is B4, 182 Mary Ellen Drive, Shoreview, Longborough, Council District 6, EMS number 463-10-02-132, zoned PUD, requesting a variance from section 54-250 Shoreview, Longborough Master Plan and zoning regulations to allow a sunroom and rooftop deck to encroach into the 10-foot building setback in the OCRM critical line buffer. The owners are John and Patty Pieper. The applicant is Parker Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Dibbles. Before you on the screen, and we can go back to the first slide, that aerial view shows this property that is actually nestled in Wagner Terrace, but it's a PUD. And it has its own identity. It's called the Shoreview Longborough PUD. And a PUD, as you all probably are familiar with, is a list of requirements in a master plan that governs construction on a lot, whether it's a commercial lot or in this regard, single family. This is a single family neighborhood. These are single family lots. So this aerial view actually shows those lots that back up to the marsh. And it has become very common that subdivisions that we have, whether it's on the peninsula or elsewhere, that back up to marsh, that where the critical line affects the highland and it established how much is wetland, we have required, and it's in our zoning ordinance, that there has to be a 10-foot building setback from where the critical line is. The applicant has submitted her site plan. Yes, this site plan actually shows the building footprint. Yes. I blew this up so you could see all the different markings, where the critical line is, where the 10-foot building setback is, and the proposed addition. Lots that back up to marsh are subject to changes to the critical line. And since this development was created, and it's been more than a decade, that critical line has moved. And we actually have within our zoning ordinance lots that are subject to changes to the critical line. They actually have to be recertified every year, every 5 years. So this applicant has already had that critical line recertified, and it has moved a little bit more inward into the lot that is affecting the construction of this rear addition. The addition does meet the side setbacks, it meets lot coverage, it meets the front setback. The only issue is that encroachment into that building setback. And I don't know how clear you can see it on the screen, but in the very corner, this is the 10-foot setback from the critical line. So this is within compliance. It kind of bleeds out here. And then the most encroachment is right here. And that encroachment ends up being about 3.3 feet. So it is not a huge encroachment. The addition is only for a sunroom and a rooftop deck. So we're not talking about any kind of adverse intensification to neighbors because it backs up to the critical line. So there's no issue with adjacent neighbors. The applicant has submitted her plans showing renderings of what this addition is going to look like. It's pretty modest. It's pretty modest. They didn't expound a footprint that is not in keeping with that house that is the existing, meaning that it's in balance. It's not overwhelming to the existing architecture. We feel that the proposed addition is sensitive not only to the environment, but also to the architecture of the house. And normally PUD master plans also have HOA review and approval. And the applicant does have approval from the HOA as well as an adjacent property owner whose support has also been indicated in our presentation. We feel that the request for this variance, this encroachment, meets the variance test of exceptional and extraordinary. You have a lot, and every lot is going to be different. And some of these lots do vary in size, but we feel that it is an exceptional and extraordinary condition that is not necessarily applicable to all the other lots, especially those lots that do not back up to the critical line. There are lots that don't have that issue. We also feel that it is not going to adversely affect an adjacent property. It is to the rear. So there is no affected property to either side. And we also feel that the granting of the variance is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. We have the HOA's approval. We have a adjacent property owner that's also supportive. City's recommendation is to approve this applicant's request.
All right, do we have anybody here to speak in opposition to the application for 182 Mary Ellen Drive? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner or applicant here? All right. Like to address the board?
Hi, my name's Parker and I'm the applicant for this project. And I just wanted to add that every other property on Mary Ellen Drive on that side of it has also had additions and things on the back, so this would be very helpful for the homeowners.
All right. Anybody else wish to speak in support? Questions for Penny? Any questions for applicant?
Hey, you said the line had moved some
Since the original
since-
plat, yes, which is not uncommon. That is why we have that recertification requirement for all these lots. In fact, in the zoning ordinance, lots that were developed after 2000 are all subject to this 5-year recertification requirement.
But what happens as a result of every recertification? Is it just a reestablishment of that line so that it's updated, or
It's
what's the result of
the
doing
line
that?
is like marked by a surveyor, where the highland and the marsh line is differentiated, and then someone from the OCRM DHEC comes out and certifies that that is where the marsh line begins. And then there is a 25-foot buffer from that critical line and an additional 10-foot setback from the buffer.
And why do they do that?
So the marsh line will change over time, right? It might move back and add more to your, it might move forward and reduce. So that is a requirement by the Army or by OCRM that the line is certified every 5 years if they're going to be building structure on the lot.
So it's to protect the structure and the marsh?
Yeah, it's to provide an accurate line of where the marsh is, and the buffer will move with that marsh line.
Both buffers will, right?
Yes.
We are on the critical line and the corresponding city buffer.
Yes.
Sometimes they gain, sometimes they lose.
And what's the total encroachment that we're talking about here into the buffer? Do you know, you have that?
She said 3.3
3
feet.
feet. Yeah,
3
3.
feet, yes, where it encroaches the most.
Yeah, I see that it's not an even line.
Given that it's 3.3 feet, I'll move for approval.
All right, Mr. Goodwin moves to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Bennett seconds the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? One opposed. Scratch is opposed. The motion passes 4-1, and the variance for 182 Mary Ellen Drive is granted. Thank you. It's grass. All right, the final item on our agenda. B5, 200-210 Spring Street, West Side, Council District 6, PMS number 460-11-01-011 and 013, zoned MU2WH, requesting an amendment under section 54-964 of the BZA-Z approval granted on October 1st, 2019 to change the board's condition of approval for 152 unit accommodations use. Conditions in MOU between West Side Neighborhood Association and owners of 200 and 210 Spring Street that required 17 of the 152 units to be rented for 30 days or longer. The owner is 200 Spring Street Development LLC and JJR Development LLC. The applicant is JJR Development LLC. Ms. Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Dibbles. The slide before you shows these two properties that are adjacent and under the same ownership that was approved back in October of 2019 for a 152 unit accommodations use. Since then, just a little background, that approval that was an original approval in 2019, that approval has been extended through the Vested Rights Act with at least 2 extensions. And there has been an amendment, or I should say, a ruling by the South Carolina State Assembly that has extended the vestedness. And I'm saying all this to make it very, very clear that that original approval in 2019 is still vested. It is still in place. The request had to do with back in 2019, there was a memorandum of use agreement between the applicant and the West Side Neighborhood Association. A lot of work was put into at that time to get this development approved. And as part of wanting to be sensitive to the needs of the community, to provide housing, affordable housing, that agreement was made. And in that agreement, it was determined based on our affordable housing ordinance that out of the 152 units approved, 17 of those units would be for long-term rental, 30 days or longer. Well, now we're in 2024 and things have changed, the market has changed, and that requirement is a little problematic. So the applicant is asking, okay, I've been approved, meeting all the criteria for an accommodations use. All I'm asking is to be relieved of that requirement that 17 has to be long-term. So when that discussion per email, and I was included on the email, was presented to the zoning administrator, the zoning administrator said, probably fine. However, you do need to go back to the board because this was an agreement that was a part of the condition for approval. I can't just say it is fine. So this is where we are today, asking that those 17 units become the same units, just like the other 17, that the 152 unit approval now does not separate these 17 units from that approval. The entire approval now is subject to the approval per the accommodations ordinance. The applicant, after several attempts, went back before the West Side Neighborhood Association. And they were finally heard at a meeting. And at that meeting, it was voted upon that that condition would be removed. We're just showing plans of the original approval just to let you know nothing has changed. So they went to the neighborhood association. Right there, thank you. They went to the neighborhood association on July the 25th. And based on the protocols of that neighborhood, it was voted upon and it was a majority that supported this change, releasing those 17 units from long-term occupancy. In addition to that, we wanted to make sure that we had on record in writing the official letter from the neighborhood association, and that is also shown on that screen, from the neighborhood president stating that they're in full support of this development moving forward as it was approved without those 17 units being required to have long-term occupancy. City's recommendation with this documentation and agreement from the West Side Neighborhood Association supports the applicant's request. At this time, we are not aware of any opposition. That letter from the neighborhood was that community effort to review this application and provide that letter. And we feel that that is sufficient for the city to recommend approval of this application.
All right, thanks, Penny. Do we have anybody here who intends to speak against the application for 210 Spring Street? Anybody in opposition? Yes, nobody's in opposition. Okay, great. All right, Mr. Roberts, I see you. Would you like to address the board?
Just briefly, Jeff Roberts, JJR Development. This project has evolved considerably, received BAR approvals and things of that nature. And just to slightly reframe what Penny said, the original agreement that we had was a voluntary agreement. We have done so much in this particular neighborhood for 25 years. We have a special relationship. We've done everything from residential housing stock, affordable housing, and probably put more homeowners and baby garages in here than any other holistic development involved with the school system. So, and Mr. Lawrence would attest significant benefit to the area schools and the kids and whatnot. So we have a superlative relationship with the neighborhood, but the original agreement was voluntary. And this is classified more as a residential type hotel. That's a Class A type of hotel with each unit being autonomous kitchens, laundries, not like a Marriott Courtyard or anything, but these are fine residences and symbiotic to the medical university. And this particular change to the voluntary, which we volunteered this, because we see the use of this really for medical travelers, short-term stays from foreign scholars, physicians that are coming in, postdoc scholars. So we see a lot of symbiosis to the medical university, who does not provide any housing to those visitors. But along came the pandemic, and hospitality was, who knows what was going to happen. So ultimately, we came out of the pandemic and we got BAR approvals and resolved this project. So it extended those vested rights that Penny is speaking about in addition to. And ultimately, we have a lot of things going on, and from our lenders and capital stack. When it was reviewed by a potential partner out of Miami, they looked at this and says, oh, this is unusual. And our lenders find it challenging to parse through, what is this? It's a hotel, but it's got these 17 long-term things and a voluntary neighborhood agreement. So it made it, back in the day, we could have gotten the construction loan, prior to the pandemic, and the banks are different now. They need to be what does it do? It's a hotel. It doesn't change the use. It doesn't change the configuration of the property. It doesn't change the meeting space. Doesn't change anything. It will not change the programming. We view the property to be used by people perhaps significantly more than that percentage, just in the stream of commerce, the way it's designed. But this regulation really, now with banking being more restrictive and putting compartments of what this is, it's in a hotel bucket. It's certainly not a multifamily. So again, we corral the overwhelming majority of the neighborhood, and I think it was a vote of 25-2, and just two cantankerous holdouts. We certainly couldn't have been more transparent with the neighborhood, and again, over decades, we have built up a lot of credibility and done magnificent things. So we just are looking to slightly modify our voluntary neighborhood agreement with the acquiescence of the people we agreed with it to. And they've agreed.
What was the driving force behind the original agreement? And it was 17 of the 152. Was that a percentage number?
We own that. To parse through that, it was a percentage of an increment of, we owned the old Pizza Hut at 210 Spring. And then Eddie Buck, who was our neighbor, and we let him use as we had that property, the Kempton on the corner. We were very friendly with Mr. Buck when we put the Kempton in design, which ultimately now is functioning as a assisted living and Alzheimer memory care. And then Eddie Buck, who was sandwiched between the Kempton and 210 Spring Street, he calls with the gas station and says, Jeff, I always liked you. If you want to buy the gas station, I'm going to go sell it. Could you close in 3 weeks? I says, well, thanks, Eddie. Just give me 4 weeks. I don't close it. So we ended up buying that. We combined it because it created a geometric efficiency of what we had at the property at 210, and we added this aggregate assemblage in at 200.
Okay.
And then we just, and not to correct it, we do a lot of affordable housing in the neighborhood for the city, but this didn't play into that. It was sort of like, this is the use of the property, and I view a lot of these a lot of these apartments, hotel apartments, that are not functioning like these things range from 500-600 square feet to 1,000 square feet. So they're not the typical 250 square foot hotel.
And again, the basis for the 17 units?
It was actually sort of voluntary. It wasn't even
The number was sort of arbitrary?
The number was sort of arbitrary as 15% of the delta of the additional rooms from the 69.
Okay,
That's how we got to the
I got
17 from
so you
that
had the
equation.
original 69
And it was-
units.
Yeah,
Got it.
and we always envisioned and still envision a number larger than that to be using those things because it's not configured as one night stays as fully functional apartment, but now it presents an unusual restriction as credit criteria and banking has gotten more segmented and compartmentalized. This issue has come up with our capital stack, and I just sort of need to inoculate it.
I understand. So you need a pure play for financing.
Yes, instead of muddy the waters on what it wants to be when it grows up, it wants to be that. And that was always the intent, and the programming doesn't change when I.
Okay. And I think we saw that are there any other parties to the MOU other than the owner developer and the West Side Association, or those the only two?
No, sorry. Just that voluntary original neighborhood agreement, which we now propose, which now we have modified that agreement and now waits for your decision.
Which now has become involuntary as a condition of your development approval. So, yeah, I get it. Any further discussion, questions? All right, Ms. Grass moves to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Goodwin seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. The motion passes unanimously 4-0, and the modification of the special exception for 200 and 210 Spring Street is granted.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're adjourned. Thank you. All right, Mr. Johnson.
See, oh.
Yeah.
oh.
Very good job.